required to actually be president, to know about nuclear throwaways, to go toe-to-toe in negotiations with the Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev. And so I kind of like the fact that your folks, whether it was Webster or Lincoln, they were modeling how they were going to act when they actually governed.
And they had to persuade when they governed. And they were announcing policies, they were persuading their audiences, persuading each other. And I think what you're saying is that Kennedy and other modern politicians using multimedia want to persuade us that we can trust them.
That's right.
That we can like them. And we're not really engaging seriously with policy.
In 1965, as Martin Luther King was organizing protests in Selma, Alabama, at the height of the civil rights movement, more than 1,000 undergraduates crammed into the halls of the Cambridge Union Debating Society. They came to watch two American writers face off, British parliamentary style.
The emotion that has drawn this huge crowd tonight is this, that the American dream has been achieved at the expense of the American Negro.
Arguing in support of that motion, James Baldwin.
The well-known American novelist who's achieved worldwide fame with his novel Another Country.
Arguing against the motion, William F. Buckley.
Very well known as a conservative in the United States. I must stress a conservative in the American sense. Editor of the National Review, one of the early supporters of Senator Goldwater.
Wow, this sounds interesting. What do you think, Peter?
Whoa, bring it on.
Yeah, but I have a confession. I had never heard of this debate till I started doing prep for this show. But once I actually listened to this debate, what struck me more than anything is how relevant it is to the very conversations we're having about race today.
Here Baldwin is talking about themes of police brutality, and across from him, Buckley is talking about themes of progress and notions of national identity.
And patience.
And patience, certainly, yes.
This is historian Seneca Vaught, who's written about this debate. I asked him about the motion that was up for debate that day, that the American dream has been achieved at the expense of African Americans. It seems like a proposition that's pretty hard to disagree with today. But what about in 1965?
In 1965, many of these questions were unsettled. Today, we almost feel sorry for someone like Buckley for taking up the opposing side of that position. But I think James Baldwin saw that this question was a question that really got to the core of what America was.
It comes as a great shock to discover that the country, which is your birthplace, and to which you owe your life and your identity, has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you.
Could you sketch the two worldviews that were in play during this debate?
Certainly. So James Baldwin is born in New York in 1924, but he always sees himself as a Southern son. His family had migrated to Harlem. On the other hand, Buckley was also born in New York in 1925, but in circumstances very different from Baldwin's. He was born into an upper-class, quite affluent family, spending summers abroad.
My great-grandparents worked too. Presumably yours worked also. I don't know of anything that has ever been created without the expense of something.
Both of them had very different worldviews. And in the debate, that comes to be a center point of distinction, with Baldwin saying that the key problem here is different systems of reality that are impacting the way that we view the world and that we view the place of African Americans in our society. There's this point in the debate where he says,
I built the railroad under someone else's been for nothing.
He literally is standing in for all African Americans.
That's right.
Over all of American history up to that point.
That's right. But what I think is equally interesting and missing from Buckley's view of the world is Baldwin also stands in for people like Jim Clark.
Sheriff Clark in Selma, Alabama.
Who infamously became associated with the repression of black protests and so on.
You know, no one can be dismissed as a total monster. I'm sure he loves his wife, his children. I'm sure that, he likes to get drunk. After all, one's got to assume he is visibly a man like me. But he doesn't know what drives him. And I suggest further that in the same way, the moral life of Alabama sheriffs and poor Alabama ladies, white ladies, their moral lives have been destroyed by the plague called color, that the American sense of reality has been corrupted by it.
For Baldwin, the broader critique in this debate is what I would characterize as a bitter optimism. It's critiquing the systems of reality to make America better or greater.
And by contrast, Buckley comes across as dismissive and in some ways looking to get off good one-liners.
There is no instant cure for the race problem in America. And anybody who tells you that there is a charlatan and ultimately a boring man. And under no circumstances must America be addressed and told that the only alternative to the status quo is to overthrow that civilization which we consider to be the faith of our fathers, the faith indeed of your fathers.
From Buckley's perspective, he saw Western civilization and many of the ideas coming out of the Enlightenment as the basis of all progress, where I think that Baldwin would certainly agree to some extent that many of the contributions of the Western world are certainly noteworthy, that there were other elements and that there were other contributions and certainly other critiques that could be made. So for Buckley, he saw any critique of the existing thesis of Western civilization as a fundamental threat. Further than that, he sees it as a line in the sand that he's willing to fight violently to defend.
If it does finally come to a confrontation, a radical confrontation between giving up what we understand to be the best features of the American way of life, which at that level is indistinguishable as far as I can see from the European way of life, then we will fight the issue. And we will fight the issue not only in the Cambridge Union, but we will fight it as you were once recently called to do on beaches and on hills and on mountains and on landing grounds, and we will be convinced.
By that time in the debate, as if you've seen the footage of it, people are making noise and beginning to shuffle out because they're very disconcerted by Buckley's endorsement of violence at that point.
Somebody from the crowd yells out, well, why don't you just let African Americans vote in Mississippi? And Buckley seizes on that and says,
I think actually what is wrong in Mississippi, sir, is not that not enough Negroes are voting, but that too many white people are voting.
Completely dismissive of the fact that so few African Americans in the South were even allowed the possibility of registering.
That's right.
Well, to me, the good news is that a debate from 1965 can feel so fresh and so relevant to today's systems of reality, or competing systems of reality, if you will. The bad news is we're still debating the same things. I mean, do debates do any good if we're still debating the same clash of worldviews?
That's a great question. And I would say that democracy itself is not really a destination, but it's a process. And as long as the debates are taking place, as jaded as we may be as it relates to the outcomes, I think that's an important contribution.